Hello aspirants, welcome to Insights IAS Current Affairs for your UPSC exam preparation. In today's session, we will understand the important developments and their relevance for the upcoming prelims. We'll be covering 5 key topics. First, a significant constitutional amendment bill, then a new government scheme for exporters. After that, we'll look at 2 updates from science and technology, followed by a major environmental report, and finally, we'll cover some important updates for international relations and mapping. Let us begin with the first topic. So, our first topic is from Indian polity. First, let's just refresh our understanding of what a constitution amendment bill is. Under Article 368, this isn't just an ordinary law. It's a special bill that is designed to change the very text of the constitution. And because of this, the process to pass it is much tougher than for an ordinary bill. It requires what we call a special majority. So why are we discussing this now? Well, this topic is in the news because the Constitution 131st Amendment Bill, which was looking to modify Articles 81, 82 and 334A, was recently defeated on the floor of the Lok Sabha. It couldn't get the required majority. Now, before we get into what this bill was actually trying to do, let us also understand the specific constitutional articles involved. Article 368 grants Parliament the power to amend the Constitution and lays down the specific procedures for different types of amendments. Articles 81 and 82 pertain to the composition of the Lok Sabha and the delimitation of constituencies. And these are exactly what the 131st bill sought to modify. And then there is Article 334A, which was itself introduced by the 106th Amendment back in 2023. The 131st bill intended to amend this article specifically to accelerate the women's quota. Now, from a prelims point of view, the procedure for passing such a bill is extremely important. First, it needs a special majority in each House of Parliament. And this next point is crucial. Please remember this. There is absolutely no provision for a joint sitting. Why? Because amending the Constitution is just too important to be decided by a simple majority in a joint session. And on top of that, if the amendment touches upon any federal features like this bill did with state representation, it also needs to be ratified by at least half of the state legislatures before receiving presidential assent. Okay, so what was this specific bill trying to do? Let us look at its key features. First, it proposed a really significant increase in Lok Sabha seats, from the current 543 all the way up to 850 to reflect demographic changes. Second, and this is a key point, it wanted to delink the delimitation process from the census data that will come after 2026. The idea behind this was to allow the use of the 2011 census data right now, and doing that would then allow the center to implement a 33% quota for women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies immediately after the new delimitation, and specifically in time for the 2029 elections. So here is the most interesting part. If you look at the numbers, more members voted for the bill than against it. So why did it fail? The answer is all about the type of majority. You see, 298 voted in favor and 230 voted against. That is a simple majority, no problem there. But a constitutional amendment needs a special majority, and that has 2 conditions. First, a majority of the total membership of the House, and second, a majority of not less than 2/3 of the members who are present and voting. In this case, approximately 352 votes would have been needed to meet the 2/3 requirement, and the 298 votes in favor simply fell short. This difference between simple and special majority is absolutely critical for your exam. Now let us also look at what happened in the immediate aftermath. The opposition leaders argued that the bill was an attack on the Constitution because it linked women's rights to a controversial delimitation process that could alter India's political structure. Following the defeat, the Speaker adjourned the House amid protests by the NDA leadership. And what does this mean going forward? Well, women's reservation is now unlikely to be implemented for the 2029 general elections because the original 106th Amendment of 2023 mandates waiting for the post-2026 census. Additionally, the existing freeze on Lok Sabha seats based on the 1971 census will continue, maintaining the status quo on regional representation. So, just before we move on, remember these key points. The 131st Amendment Bill was defeated in the Lok Sabha after receiving 298 votes in favor against the approximately 352 needed for a two-thirds special majority. It sought to expand Lok Sabha seats to 850, de-link delimitation from post-2026 census data, and implement 33% women's reservation. No joint sitting is possible for constitutional amendment bills, and federal touching amendments also require ratification by at least half the state legislatures. Alright, from polity, let's move on to our next topic, which is an important government scheme. We are talking about the Relief Scheme. Now, the full form is Resilience and Logistics Intervention for Export Facilitation. So, what exactly is this? Relief is a time-bound, targeted intervention launched to mitigate the financial and logistical risks faced by Indian exporters due to geopolitical tensions in West Asia. Think of it as a financial buffer against extraordinary war risk surcharges, freight hikes, and insurance spikes that threaten the competitiveness of Indian goods. It acts as a safety net, particularly for smaller businesses that are most exposed to these shocks. Coming to its aim, the scheme has three specific objectives. First, to prevent order cancellations and safeguard employment in export-linked sectors during maritime crises. Second, to provide surety and confidence to exporters, especially MSMEs, allowing them to continue shipments to high-risk zones. And third, to stabilize the financial burden on exporters by covering the gap between normal and conflict-era logistics costs. Now, the scheme was officially launched on March 19, 2026 as part of the Export Promotion Mission. And the nodal agency responsible for administering it is ECGC Limited, formerly known as the Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India. Now let us look at what goes inside the scheme. The relief scheme is structured into three complementary components, with a total financial outlay of Rs 497 crore, and that is a figure you should hold on to. Component 1 is for existing ECGC policy holders. It provides up to 100% risk coverage for war-related and political losses. And importantly, premiums are frozen at pre-disruption rates, with the government absorbing the additional risk cost. Component 2 is designed to encourage new exporters to get insurance coverage. It provides a 95% risk coverage backstop, and it has recently been clarified to include those obtaining a fresh ECGC whole turnover policy on or after March 16, 2026. And Component 3 is for MSMEs that are not insured. It gives them a 50% reimbursement of extraordinary freight and insurance surcharges such as the war risk surcharge. But this is capped at Rs 50 lakh per exporter to ensure wide distribution of benefits. So why was it in the news? The geographical coverage of this scheme was recently expanded. 2 new countries, Egypt and Jordan, were added. This brings the total number of eligible destinations to 12. The full list now covers the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Yemen, Egypt, and Jordan. And here is what makes this significant. The scheme ensures that India's export momentum is not derailed by regional conflicts or the closure of critical choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. And by reimbursing 50% of logistical surcharges, it specifically protects the narrow profit margins of smaller businesses that are most vulnerable to shipping volatility. So, to quickly recap for your exam, the Relief Scheme stands for Resilience and Logistics Intervention for Export Facilitation, launched on March 19, 2026 under the Export Promotion Mission. Its nodal agency is ECGC Limited. The total outlay is Rs 497 crore, and it now covers 12 eligible destinations following the addition of Egypt and Jordan. Okay, next up is our section on science and technology, and we have two important developments here. First up is foot and mouth disease, or FMD. Now, this is a highly contagious viral disease affecting cloven-hoofed animals including cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, and various wildlife species like buffalo and deer. It is caused by an aphthovirus of the Picornaviridae family. While it is rarely fatal in adult animals, it causes severe production losses and is a major barrier to international trade. The reason it is in the news is that the World Organization for Animal Health (WOAH) has issued an urgent call to action following the unprecedented international spread of FMD serotype SAT1. So how does this virus actually spread? The virus is notorious for its ability to travel through multiple pathways. Direct contact between infected and susceptible animals can occur via saliva, urine, dung, or fluid from ruptured blisters. Humans can carry the virus on their clothes, boots, and skin, and vehicles, tires, and farm equipment also act as major vectors. Uncooked food scraps, milk, or biological materials like semen containing the virus can trigger new outbreaks. And in certain climatic conditions, the virus can even be carried by the wind over long distances from one farm to another. The current international crisis driven by SAT1 is primarily happening because of unregulated animal movements and informal trade networks. Markets and holding areas where animals from different sources come together serve as high-risk mixing points where the virus amplifies before being transported to new regions. Now coming to the key features of the disease. Clinically, animals show a high fever followed by the development of vesicles, that is, blisters on the tongue, lips, mouth, and between the hooves. Affected animals suffer from lameness, excessive salivation, and a dramatic drop in milk yield. And while adult animals typically survive, young calves, lambs, and piglets may die suddenly due to myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle. Now, for prelims, this is probably the most critical fact you need to remember about FMD. There are 7 distinct serotypes of this virus: O, A, C, SAT1, SAT2, SAT3, and Asia1. Immunity against one serotype does not protect an animal against any of the other 6. This makes controlling the disease incredibly difficult, and it is a perfect kind of statement for an MCQ. Ruminants like cattle and buffalo can also become carriers, harboring the virus in their throat for months even after recovery. There is no curative treatment for FMD once an animal is infected. Management focuses entirely on prevention and control. This involves vaccination using serotype-specific inactivated vaccines to build herd immunity, strict biosecurity measures, including movement controls and disinfection, and in many regions, a stamping out policy where all susceptible animals on an affected farm are culled to break the transmission cycle. So, to quickly recap, FMD is a highly contagious viral disease caused by an aphthovirus of the Picornaviridae family affecting cloven-hoofed animals. World Organization for Animal Health has issued an urgent alert for the spread of serotype SAT1. There are 7 serotypes in total, and immunity against one does not protect against the others. That is your key prelims fact here. Let's cover updates for international relations. The Lebanon ceasefire deal. First, a US-backed 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon officially went into effect at midnight on April 17, 2026. So what exactly is this deal? It is a temporary cessation of hostilities designed as a goodwill gesture to enable direct peace negotiations between the two countries. And this is historically significant. It marks the first time in decades that these two technically at-war nations have engaged in direct diplomatic talks to resolve their border and security issues. Coming to its aim, the ceasefire seeks to stop the devastating aerial bombardments and rocket fire that have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. It also aims to facilitate the broader goal of regional stability, including the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, let us look at the key features. The truce began on April 16th at 2100 GMT and can be extended if both sides demonstrate good faith in negotiations. The deal is asymmetrical in terms of defense rights. Israel preserves its inherent right to self-defense against imminent or ongoing attacks, while the deal prohibits Israel from carrying out offensive military operations. And critically, the deal does not require an immediate Israeli withdrawal. Troops will maintain a 10-kilometer buffer zone inside southern Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah incursions. Now let us also understand Lebanon from a mapping perspective. Lebanon is a Mediterranean nation characterized by rugged, mountainous terrain and deep-seated religious diversity. Despite its small size, it is a critical geopolitical crossroads in the Levant. Its capital is Beirut, located on the central coast. Lebanon shares its border with Syria to the north and east, and with Israel to the south. The shared boundary with Israel is currently marked by the Blue Line, a 120-kilometer border established by the UN in 2000. In terms of key geographical features, the coastal plain is a narrow, fertile strip where most major cities like Beirut, Tyre, and Sidon are located. The Lebanon Mountains, also known as Mount Lebanon, form a 160-kilometer range of limestone and sandstone that rises steeply from the coast, reaching its highest peak at Kurnat al-Sauda at 10,131 feet. The Bekaa Valley is a fertile, high-altitude plateau situated between the Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon ranges and is part of the East African Rift system. The Anti-Lebanon range forms the natural border with Syria and includes the snow-capped Mount Hermon. And the Litani River, the longest river in Lebanon at 145 kilometers, flows entirely within Lebanon's borders and serves as a critical strategic marker for the security zone in the south. So, to quickly recap, the US-backed 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon came into effect on April 17, 2026. Key features include asymmetrical defense rights, a 10-kilometer Israeli buffer zone in southern Lebanon, and no requirement for immediate Israeli withdrawal. Lebanon borders Syria to the north and east, and Israel to the south, with the Blue Line marking the southern boundary. Alright, let's move on from tech to the environment. We are going to discuss a very significant report that has just come out. The first ever State of India's BATS report 2024-25 has been released. So what exactly is this? It is India's first comprehensive national level assessment of bat species conducted by the Nature Conservation Foundation and Bat Conservation International. The report aims to map the diversity, distribution, and conservation status of bats to provide a baseline for future environmental policy. Now, let us look at the key findings. In terms of diversity leaders, West Bengal tops the list with 68 species, and Meghalaya is right behind it with 66. The report flagged a significant research gap. 35 species remain unassessed or are data deficient, and there is a notable lack of research centers dedicated to bat study. This is a major concern because it is very hard to protect a species when we do not have enough information about it. On roosting trends, while caves and trees remain primary natural roosts, bats are increasingly using man-made structures like dilapidated buildings and government monuments. The report also emphasizes that bats are vital for pollination, seed dispersal, and pest control, directly impacting agricultural productivity and soil nutrition. Now, coming to the types of bat species in India. India is home to 135 species in total. Of these, 16 are endemic, meaning they are found only in India, and 7 are considered threatened. Among the threatened species, the Kolar leaf-nosed bat is critically endangered, found in only one cave in Karnataka. The endangered category includes the Nicobar flying fox, Salim Ali's fruit bat, and the Andaman horseshoe bat. The report also identifies 4 main endemic clusters in the country. The Himalayas and Northeast region is home to species like the somber bat and the Meghalaya thick-thumbed bat. The Western Ghats cluster includes Salim Ali's fruit bat and Srini's long-fingered bat. The Andaman and Nicobar cluster features the Nicobar flying fox and Humphrey's horseshoe bat. And the Gangetic Plains cluster includes the Durga Das's leaf-nosed bat. A question could easily be framed asking you to match bat species with their specific endemic region, so do take note of these. Now let us also understand what bats actually are. Bats belong to the order Chiroptera and are the only mammals capable of true and sustained flight. They occupy a unique evolutionary niche, with a history of co-speciation with viruses dating back 52 million years. In terms of size, they range from the bumblebee bat, which weighs just 2 grams and is the world's smallest mammal, all the way to the flying fox, which has a 2-meter wingspan and weighs 1.5 kilograms. Most microbats navigate using biological sonar. They emit high-frequency ultrasonic calls between 20 and 200 kHz and decode the echoes to map their surroundings in total darkness. And contrary to popular belief, bats are not blind. Many species use light cues to orient themselves during flight. Their wings are essentially modified hands, with thin membranes stretched between long fingers, and hanging upside down is an evolutionary advantage because their legs are too small for a dead stop takeoff from the ground. So, to quickly recap for your exam, the State of India Bats 2024-25 report is India's first national bat assessment conducted by the Nature Conservation Foundation and Bat Conservation International. India has 135 bat species, of which 16 are endemic and 7 are threatened. West Bengal leads with 68 species, Meghalaya follows with 66, and 35 species remain data deficient. Bats belong to the order Chiroptera and are the only mammals capable of true sustained flight. Our next topic in science and technology is Claude Mythos. So what is it? Claude Mythos is a next-generation frontier AI model designed with advanced reasoning, coding, and technical problem-solving capabilities that far exceed previous flagship systems. It is specifically engineered to analyze massive, complex code bases and identify security weaknesses that have remained undetected by human researchers for decades. It has been unveiled by Anthropic. Now, it is being developed under a specific initiative called Project Glasswing, a cybersecurity-focused project aimed at deploying powerful AI tools to defenders before they can be exploited by attackers. Coming to its aim, Claude Mythos is designed to allow infrastructure operators and technology firms to identify and patch zero-day vulnerabilities before hackers can find them. It is also being rolled out as a limited preview model that assesses the risks of autonomous AI agents in high-stakes technical environments. And critically, it is kept away from the general public to prevent the democratization of sophisticated cyber attack tools. So how does this actually work? Unlike traditional security scanners that follow rigid patterns, Claude Mythos uses autonomous reasoning to understand the underlying logic of an operating system or browser. It can deconstruct code by reading through millions of lines in seconds. It can simulate exploits by reasoning through how a specific flaw could be manipulated to bypass security. And it can autonomously discover thousands of bugs across different platforms with minimal human supervision, operating at roughly 10 times the speed of previous automated tools. Now, coming to the key features. Claude Mythos possesses a higher level of cognitive ability than the current Claude 3.5 or 4 series, particularly in specialized technical domains. It has demonstrated success in finding flaws across diverse environments, including web browsers, enterprise software, and major operating systems. It compresses the time required for vulnerability discovery from months of manual labor to near instantaneous analysis. And it features a gated deployment, where access is strictly monitored and limited to vetted security organizations and government agencies. And here is what makes this significant. Mythos perfectly illustrates the dual-use nature of AI. The same tool that secures a bank can also be used to rob it, blurring the line between offensive and defensive tech. It signals a shift toward autonomous cyber warfare, where the speed of AI-driven scanning makes traditional manual patching cycles obsolete. Just before we move on, remember these key points. Claude Mythos is Anthropic's most advanced AI system, developed under Project Glasswing, designed to autonomously identify zero-day software vulnerabilities. It operates at roughly 10 times the speed of previous automated tools and is available only to vetted security organizations and government agencies through a controlled, gated deployment. Now for our mapping update, we turn to the Colorado River in the American Southwest. A new study by the University of Washington has explained why billions of liters of water from the Colorado River are disappearing before reaching major reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell. So what is the Colorado River? It is a 1,450-mile long, that is approximately 2,330 kilometers river known as the lifeblood of the American Southwest. It is the principal freshwater artery for one of the most arid regions in North America, supplying water for municipal use, hydropower, and irrigation to 40 million people. The river originates at the Continental Divide at La Poudre Pass in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado, at an elevation of 10,000 feet. It occupies an area of approximately 250,000 square miles across 7 US states and 2 Mexican states. In terms of where it flows, the upper basin states are Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. The lower basin states are Arizona, California, and Nevada. And internationally, it flows into northwestern Mexico through the Sonoran Desert before reaching its mouth at the Gulf of California. The river's major tributaries in the upper basin include the Green River, its largest tributary, along with the Gunnison, San Juan, Dolores, and Roaring Fork rivers. In the lower basin, the main tributaries are the Gila, Little Colorado, Virgin, and Bill Williams rivers. Now coming to the key features. The Colorado River is the primary architect of the Grand Canyon, having carved its path through millions of years of geological layers. It also features Horseshoe Bend, a world-famous entrenched meander near Page, Arizona, where the river makes a 270-degree turn in a 1,000-foot-deep canyon. Its two major reservoirs are Lake Mead, formed by the Hoover Dam, and Lake Powell, formed by the Glen Canyon Dam. These are the two largest man-made reservoirs in the United States. And the river is governed by what is called the Law of the River, a complex collection of compacts, federal laws, and treaties, most notably the 1922 Colorado River Compact. So why is the water vanishing? The study shifts the blame away from simple evaporation to a complex ecological siphoning effect driven by four interlinked factors. The first is aridification. Rising temperatures are permanently reducing flows through a transition from drought to a state of chronic dryness, not just temporary dry spells. The second is what researchers call biological pumps warmer. Drier springs cause mountain vegetation, from wildflowers to high-elevation forests, to wake up earlier in the year and draw moisture directly from the melting snowpack before it can reach the river. This is worsened by the clear sky effect, where clearer skies and increased solar radiation enhance the thirst of plants, which use snowmelt as a primary food and cooling supply. And finally, there is a vapor pressure deficit, where a warmer atmosphere pulls even more moisture from the soil and snow, leaving only 50% of anticipated runoff even when snowpack is at 100% of normal. So, to quickly recap, the Colorado River is a 1,450-mile river originating at La Poudre Pass in Rocky Mountain National Park and supplying 40 million people across 7 US states and 2 Mexican states. A University of Washington study identified 4 causes of its water loss: aridification, biological pumps, the clear sky effect, and vapor pressure deficit, with the last leaving only 50% of anticipated runoff even at full snowpack. So, to recap today's session, we've covered the 131st Amendment Bill and its defeat in the Lok Sabha, the relief scheme for exporters and its expansion to 12 eligible destinations, the critical fact about FMD's 7 serotypes and the war alert on SAT-1, the new AI model Claude Mythos and its Project Glasswing initiative, the key findings from the State of India's BATS report, and finally, the Lebanon ceasefire deal and the Colorado River water crisis. For your note-making, remember to keep the relief scheme under GS2 governance and the BATS report under GS3 environment. For the full current affairs article and daily current affairs MCQs, visit insightsonindia.com through the link in the description. Also, subscribe to our Insights IAS YouTube channel and join our official Telegram group using the link provided in the description for all free and important updates related to the UPSC exam. Thank you.